was saying,
Okay,
so the
Yeah.
pursuit isn't necessarily scientific and outward. Like, we
Yeah.
might discover new things, but I think it's going to be so outside of our comprehension that, like, the realest way to get there is internal. And so I think there's methods to get there, like meditation, I genuinely believe is a way to, like, get to an internal place.
That's interesting.
Like, I wouldn't even call that prayer. That's just sitting in the reality and experiencing. And I think people who have meditated for 30 years have entirely, vastly different experiences of the same reality, but they've dedicated themselves to looking at it in, like, a different lens. I think psychedelics do it too, but
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like, oh, that's just the guy who does mushrooms.
Are you into that stuff?
I have used psychedelics, but it's
Yeah.
not something I do consistently.
Yeah.
I like to see it as, like, a tool for personal growth. So if you're setting out to just have fun, well, then it's just a party drug. Who fucking cares? Like, whoa, I saw crazy colors. But if you're like, I want to meditate and grow and become more open and kinder, then it also can help with that.
Yeah. So how do you differentiate that from spiritual practice?
I don't think I do. I think a lot of spiritual practices tap into the same thing. Actually, it's funny. I'll show you my shirt. Kind of
Different paths, same stop.
different path, same stop. I think that's the idea. It's like a lot of spiritual practices are all climbing up the mountain, taking different paths. But once you get to the peak, everybody's at the peak. And so I think that, like, we like to attribute a lot of different ways that you got to do it. But I think a lot of people from different contexts have all reached the same spot that we might call enlightenment. But I think that's just like a more full understanding of the reality that we share.
Okay, so is that a definition of sorts, kind of, even though it's hard to define, like that enlightenment is? Oh, say it again.
It's like a fuller understanding of what we all experience.
Okay, so a fuller understanding. Can you kind of flesh that out? What does that mean to have a fuller understanding of what we experience?
Wow. I think that, like, it is our tendency to blind ourselves to the world around us. Some of it's intentional, some's not. So, like, if you smoke, your taste buds and your smelling get worse over time.
Yeah.
You're having you have a lesser understanding of the universe that you exist in than somebody who's never smoked and messed up your olfactory senses, whatever. And so I think, like, there's other ways that you can expand that's beyond those five senses, you know? So, like, I have an example. Have you ever seen that blind dude who, like, clicks to make the echolocation? And it's like, that man is using the tools provided to him to get a fuller understanding of the world, while some of them aren't, like, active. And so I think that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Okay, yeah, I kind of see what you mean. So, with kind of using your smoking example, like someone who has an addiction, in a sense, or I guess maybe you talked about him dampering his sensory organs, kind of.
Sure.
But would addiction limit someone's scope of the world too?
I think probably. I think anything that we put into our bodies is going to have an impact on it. So,
but less of like putting it into your bodies, but more like the psychological kind of dependence.
oh, interesting. I don't know if I can make that claim. I don't think I know enough about addiction to say that. And I'm addicted to nicotine. I'll be honest. I'm an academic. When I need the mental stimulant, like, type of paper, I do that. But I also think that there's been times where it's a crutch, and so it does, like, impact the way that my brain is able to produce dopamine or whatever, like the serotonin. I don't know. And so I think it does create a limit on, like, my own capabilities to experience the world in a raw, natural setting, and instead I'm, like, supplementing it with other things.
Okay. So along that same logic, would you like agree with the sentiment that enlightenment is something like getting rid of the limitations that disallow you from interacting to the world and to the fullest extent? Or is that something you'd agree with?
I think so. I think the goal of reaching, maybe not reaching enlightenment, because I don't know if it's really possible to be fully enlightened, but that pursuit, I think, is trying to, like, free yourself from those limitations. It is getting rid of attachments and hindrances. I definitely lean towards that, like, Buddhist mentality of enlightenment, where it's like
Desires.
getting rid of desires, releasing those things, and accepting just what is in the present moment.
Okay, cool. So, do you think it's actually possible to rid yourself of all desires, or is that a desire in itself, to desire being rid of desire?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head. it's complicated. I think it's a pursuit, but once you hit that point of being like, I want to get rid of my desires, that's another one. You're not accepting where you are at this point in time. I think that actually kind of goes back to that purpose question of like, are we just adrift in the universe being pushed along by forces outside of our control, or do we kind of have that like free will to pursue something?
Yeah.
And if you're pursuing enlightenment, like, is that not itself like a fight that needs to be let go of to truly appreciate like what is in the moment?
Yeah. Interesting. Do you think it's possible, like humanly possible? Because I've seen this dichotomy in the kind of religious discussions that I've interacted with, where Christians like to say that they try to focalize desire on what could be considered the right things, and Buddhism says, okay, but we want to eliminate desire altogether. Mm-hmm. And maybe the religious discussion isn't the discussion that you think is a good stage for that. But I mean, how would you parse apart that conversation?
Well, in Christianity, they have a belief that they're right. And I think that's inherent in their viewpoint that is what, like, they get caught up in. Like, it's I know what is the truth. And Buddhists, I think, once you hit a point, there's, like, it doesn't matter what the truth is.
Sure.
And so I think that, like, with Christians, they will vocalize things because they want to do the right thing, and once again, it's that belief in an objective, right way to do things. I don't know if I believe in that. That's a really hard thing to say. Is there's an objective truth, because
and I know it.
Right, you're right, and I'm the one. Yeah,
I know it completely.
and if anybody else disagrees with me, well, then you are wrong. Like that. That's wicked. That is such a that I can't. I'll get on board with that one. Yeah. However, the idea of like getting rid of all desires and all thoughts and being like truly just in it also seems damn near impossible. Like,
sure.
I don't, and I mean that's coming from somebody who doesn't do like, I don't sit and meditate for 3 hours a day. I don't only eat vegetarian. I don't like, so I that's like, I can't be the one to say like that's not possible, because I'm not the one trying to achieve it either.
Yeah.
But it doesn't surprise me that you have specific figures that are touted as like, these are the ones who've actually done it, and the rest of us are completely falling short, because I think that's like, it's a really, at some point, futile pursuit.
So what do you do then? It's a futile pursuit. Is there a better one? Or should you just try your best?
I don't even know if it's about trying. I think it's just about being.
Okay, yeah. Because trying is the wrong attitude, like we kind of talked about.
Yeah, just being present and loving, I think, is all you can do. And if you can just do that, I think like you're gonna be doing better, and every day you'll grow and change and learn. But it's about being open to the experience. It's about loving the world that we have been given. I mean, I can't change it. Like, I can't choose to remake all of this. So I think it comes down to more acceptance than anything else. I think a lot of that like dissatisfaction in life, especially in religion, can come from the idea that like things are wrong, I need to change, they can be better, and then it's all this fight for what's better, what's good, what's better, and you're not going anywhere.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the solution isn't to try, but more of this sort of acceptance and surrender of what is.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I want to push you on a couple of things just
Absolutely.
to see what you think. So you kind of talked about this. There's this inability to have a static. This is what objective truth is. This is all it is. Mm-hmm. But you also have hinted in previously in the conversation, in my estimation, that there seems to be something approximating objective truth. Like you can't always say my truth is the same as your truth. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to go all the way and say I know the truth completely. So is there like a middle ground where we could say, okay, well, there's some patterns that are consistent in reality that we can kind of tether ourselves on, but we can't definitively parse apart every little bit of it and get all the zeros and ones nailed down. Yeah. Is there like a middle ground? Like, how would you articulate that? If you completely disagree with the way I'm framing the question, then tell me that as well.
I think you're right. I think I might be contradicting myself if I'm being honest. Like, the idea of like objective truth I reject, and at the same time I believe there is some basic underlying thing that is common, which those ideas don't really mesh. So I think the way that if I have to rationalize it, it's like because we can't observe the objective truth, then we cannot claim to know it. However, it might still be there. Is kind of how I'm feeling about it. I think you can dance around it, you can get close, but I don't think we have the capacity to comprehend it. And so for us to say that we know it is wrong, but to say it doesn't exist might also be wrong.
Okay. So that's an interesting place to be. Do you think it is possible to know even a little bit of it? And this is a silly question, so if you want to just turn it down altogether, but what percentage of it do you think you can know?
I don't know about the percentage, but I genuinely I don't know about the percentage. I'll say 5%. That's my guess.
Okay. Sure.
But but I do think there's some we can know. I think isn't like that's the point of doing science. Like that's the point of being at university is to try to uncover some of that. However, like what we're always going to be, throwing darts at a dartboard blindfolded. Like we're trying to hit something, but like we're so limited that I do think there's value in that pursuit, right? We would not have smartphones if we did not understand physics and electricity, which are natural physical laws that exist that we can all experience. Sure.
Yeah.
But I think like at some point it'll break, like it'll just stop working. Like at some point scientific pursuit will not be able to hit that next step.
Yeah. That might be what we're seeing in quantum physics, where people are just, there's like this hard limit, it seems like, with understanding like how to conceptualize quantum position, superposition. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I think there's another hard limit when we're trying to localize consciousness in the brain, something like that.
Yeah.
Like, would you is that the kind of hard limits you're talking about?
Yeah, that's especially consciousness. I mean, superposition too. I think like once you get too small, those laws start to break down.
Yeah, sure.
But consciousness especially, and that goes back to the idea of like purpose. Like, if we can't locate consciousness, and yet we experience consciousness, you got a couple options. It either doesn't exist and it's just a rationalization of particles, which sounds so stupid and lame to me. Like once again, I
like you
that.
exist, right?
Right.
Like you got to be like, well, then what is it?
Then what is this? Like, then what is this? So I reject that premise, but at the same time, like, we can't localize it with science yet. I don't want to say that like, what if what if we do discover something else? But there's limits to that I don't know if. I don't know if the point even is to get an answer. That's the thing. It's like that. Is that pursuit of knowledge, like, what does it get us in the end?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to be happier if we know where consciousness comes from? Why are psychologists some of the saddest motherfuckers on this planet? Like, And so I question that. Like, is that really the pursuit? Should that be the goal?
Yeah.
Is to just know everything? And that's why I go back to that acceptance of what is in the moment.
Yeah. Yep. So you hit on a lot of good things there. I was about to because this whole discussion that we were involved in was something like epistemology, which is the philosophical fancy term to say, okay, what is true knowledge and how do we find it? And I was about to ask you a question like, okay, well, is science a valid epistemological method, or is there something else? Like a lot of people think philosophy is maybe undergirding science in some necessary way or something like this. But it sounds like the epistemological endeavor, if you allow me to use fancy esoteric terms,
Yeah, go for it.
is somewhat pointless if you're not happy. Is that true?
I would say content. It's pointless if you're not content. Happiness fades. It's an emotion just like any other. It will never last forever.
Okay, contentment.
But content is like you can be sad and still content where you're at, knowing that like it's okay that I'm sad.
Let's explore that. What is the true difference between happiness and what you call contentment? What is this difference?
Like I said, I think happy is like it's an emotion which is dictated by hormones and the situation itself. Yeah. While content is like a state of being where regardless of the sadness or the happiness or the pain or whatever you're feeling, you're still like accepting.
It's unconditional.
It's unconditional. So content, like content rides, like, and I don't think I'm content all the time. I think I have plenty of desires and things where I'm like, oh, I want to go do this now. I'm not content sitting here. Like, if I were to go home right now and sit in my dark room while like the sun's out and it's beautiful, I would not be content. Like, but I could find happiness playing a video game while also being in that dark room. But I would have something else going on in me that's like, I might be feeling these chemicals, but this isn't what I should be doing right now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. How do you differentiate that from something like conscience? Like, do you think following your conscience allows you to be more content, or is that just kind of this traditional whack thing that doesn't make any sense? Like,
conscience is interesting, like, because I grew up in the church and I'm not in the church anymore.
Yeah.
And my conscience continues to nag me during things that I have determined like are not bad. Like, let me try to find a good example for that. Like, I mean, just for instance, like sexual activity. Like in the church, there is this idea of like no sex unless you're married.
Yeah.
Marriage is a human construct. Like, it is not something that we see in like a lot of other animal societies. Like, it was mostly designed to make sure women didn't leave men and keep them down. Like, and so I would say like being sexually active is not for like, I can be content in that, or no, sorry, like I can feel a conscious like, oh, is this wrong? Yeah. And at the same time be like, well, I'm connecting with another human being in a physical manner. Like, at least when I sleep with somebody, it's not just like trying to get a nut off. Like, it's a connection. And so like, I think there is like parts of me from my past reading all this scripture to be like, I might be doing something wrong. And there's another part of me that's like, I'm actually living out part of what I've determined to be my purpose, which is to connect with the people around me. And if this is like a way to deeper a connection and a bond with somebody, like, I see that as valuable. And so I think like that, if that answers your question.
I'm gonna hit you with a curveball here, because I actually am somewhat familiar with this discussion, with regard to kind of Christian principles and such. So I know that I've heard from certain Christians that the original Judeo understanding of marriage was simply the consummation through sexual intercourse. So like, as soon as you had sex with someone, you were married to them.
Interesting.
Right?
Oh, I'm just
no.
My bad.
It's still good.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, what do you make of that? Is there something, because they would say like, and you can almost understand it at a psychological level, like you're almost psychologically connected to that person.
Yep.
And so there's an argument that somebody might make to say, okay, well, it's most psychologically healthy after you have that connection with someone to stay with them for the rest of your life, because you're like in that Judeo sense married to. I mean, how would you respond to someone saying that?
I think that definitely complicates all of the beliefs that I had about it, because now that I think about it, it's like, there's that idea of like, you sleep with somebody and then now you're like, you can feel like this like you feel a different sense over them. Wow, that is interesting. I've also heard the term in like Christian circles, like the soul bonding idea, where you're like, whatever that means. But actually, that does make sense. And I mean, if you've ever been, like, if you've run in a relationship where like you didn't sleep with somebody, you can still be friends. But if you sleep with them and then you break up, usually you're like, we're not. You can. It's been done by many people, but I can't. Usually it's like, we're not going to be friends after this, because that, like, once that connection's severed and we've taken that time away from each other, especially if you go sleep with somebody else, like, you're not, that connection don't hit the same.
Interesting.
That's a good question. I have no idea. Like, that's not something I've really considered much.
Yeah, it kind of, the first time I heard that in discussion, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So, but so we don't have to continue that discussion, I guess. Let's see. I don't know. Like, what is most interesting to you? Like, what you study something, of course. Like what do you think is what keeps you going? Like, what do you want to learn?
I study communications. I'm a master's student here, and I'm doing specifically what we call public deliberation. So it's like, how do you get people who disagree with each other to sit down and talk through a policy and come to some sort of consensus? The whole.
Do you know the time much?
Oh yeah.
5:40 almost.
Okay.
4:40. Sorry.
4:40. Yeah.
my bad.
My brain is a little shot. I'll be honest. It's Friday.
Sorry I interrupted you.
You're good. Yeah. So I mean, I study communications with the goal of like, how do we have better conversations? How are we more open with each other, and how do we get to that place in politics?
Cool.
Is that the thing I'm most interested in? I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I know that that's where I can make a career, though.
Okay. Well, you're making my job easy. How do we communicate better in politics?
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so we have to first acknowledge all of the negatives that we are easily able to slip into, like tribalism, us versus them mentalities, confirmation biases, defensiveness, things like that, where it's just like you want to go into your like primal brain of like, protect me and mine, and I don't like you and yours.
Yeah.
The way to get around that is to shape our perspectives different on issues. So instead of coming at it as us versus them, it's us versus the problem. And that's usually where you got to start. You have to see everybody as we are all participants. And I think especially in like our modern political age, we're designed, like the people who are in power at the moment want us to fight bullshit culture issues to make it us versus them, instead of recognizing like we're all human beings who all have the same similar interests. Like, we're not all the same, but even somebody who believes an entirely different political ideology than me is going to have basic underlying values that I can still agree with, you know? Somebody like I'm not huge on like a huge police force. I think they serve their function, but I don't believe that like the police need to be everywhere answering to mental health calls, stuff like that. But people who are like, we need the police, they still value safety. I value safety too. It's just we see safety in different views. And so I think it's getting to those underlying values, picking those out, saying like, okay, you care about safety. Here's how you see that manifested. I value safety. Here's how I see that manifested. And then we have a conversation about how do we get safety. And it's not about do we defund or increase funding of the police. It's how do we get safety. And we have that conversation at like a more root level.
Yeah. That's actually really profound. That's very profound, because a lot of these underlying values, we do it like across the aisle on both sides, like we might agree on. But it's like oftentimes the minutia that seems somewhat arbitrary or idiosyncratic is what is disagreed upon, and you can't see the underlying values. But then again, what do you do when the values are truly what's at stake? Like, what happens then? Because then you might be having, truly having different problems, that you're disagreeing on, as opposed to finding the problem. You know what I mean?
That's a really good question, and that's something that we grapple with like a lot, because like in arguments that are rooted in like morality, it becomes a much harder conversation. So like abortion, for instance, like abortion is not an easy topic that we can just deliberate about, because at some degree, like, some people believe like you are either murdering children or like they're not even alive yet, and those are the two camps. And so it's like the value itself is still in life, but it's like, well, now we have to define what life means.
Sure.
And now I will say both camps don't really want to budge. There was I can't remember when the study came out, but there was a study in like the early 2000s that was like when neurological activity starts happening in a fetus's brain. And it was too far separated from conception for pro-lifers to like use that as their evidence, but it was too close to conception for pro-choice to like use that for their arguments. And so they both kind of like rejected this evidence. And it's like, okay, so right, so how do we continue to have this conversation if neither side wants to acknowledge that, like, well, it's actually there is a compromise here that neither of us want to achieve. And so especially like in conversations around like personhood, we don't have those conversations here. Like we will never have a conversation where we invite like a KKK member to come talk about race issues. So it's like you don't see like a common humanity, and we can't reach a compromise there. And so that is a challenge that we face still, like that we don't have a solution to. We can do it on topics that I think people are like, they're controversial, but people are willing to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of the issues that we do. So I'm with the Center for Public Deliberation, and so we'll talk on issues like water rights. When Canvas Stadium was being built, we held deliberative events where the community could come in and talk through, do you want this, do you not want this, how's it going to work? But we're not talking about abortion. We're not talking about like reparations. Like we will never have a conversation on reparations through the CPD. That's just not what it's built for. And so I think like we can acknowledge our limitations in that way, where it's like when it comes to moral conversations, when it comes to like ideological conversations that aren't necessarily rooted in like that goes out, like their values are so uncompromising that like we're not going to get anywhere. We can't have those conversations, and I think we'll always hit like points, especially like in religion, for instance, because that is that belief of objective truth. There's no way you're going to shake somebody's view like a staunch Christian. You're not going to tell them God's not real, so we need to think about this differently. Like that doesn't work in their framework of how the universe exists.
Sure.
And so we can't necessarily get past that.
Yeah. So I guess the goal is just not to devolve into this anarchist kind of where we just start killing each other and
that's not the
so
goal.
like we're trying to hold things together, right? And I think we're doing a pretty good job. What kind of binds us together? Like what should or like has to bind us together in order for those value disagreements to not drive us into an all-out civil war? Like how are we going to remain binded together on those underlying values of valuing like human life and valuing the other, even if these fundamental disagreements are occurring? Like what can bind us together? I don't know. That might be a vague question.
Yeah, no, but I think it's love. I always am a huge proponent of like love and empathy, like recognizing this is like a spiritual term, but I conceptualize it a little different, like the divinity in somebody else. That idea that you are conscious, that idea that you have your own desires, and that you want something good from your life. And if I can recognize that, then I think we can circumvent a lot of the other issues. Like if that comes first, if loving your neighbor comes first, I'll use that in Christian terms because that's the modern, what's the biggest here. You start with just love, and then from there, I think you can get a bazillion other places.
I guess what if somebody comes up to you and they say, "Hey man, like all that love stuff, it's just a arbitrary chemical reaction, and frankly, I just want my way, and I'm gonna get my way whether you tell me this or that or whatever, or whoever tells me anything. All I care about is power and my certain ideological train." And like what if they literally don't believe in the concept of love? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, first, that's not usually a person I deal with on the regular. I'll be honest. Like,
okay, this is kind of this is a hyper-personality.
Yeah. Okay,
right?
hyper-personality, like full-blown narcissism.
Yeah,
like they're like just like I only care about me. First, I'll be like, thank you for your honesty. Like, I appreciate that.
Yeah, like how do you justify it to them? You know?
Yeah. I think the question really just comes down to like, what do they want? Because if they want like destruction and chaos, then like I think that's something I have to reject because it's like, well, other people don't want that.
Well, they just want what they want,
right?
And they don't care about anybody.
So
else.
It's what is the do you know the Ayn Rand? Is it utilitarianism? Is that the one where it's like only do what's best for yourself, and that will be what ends up being best for everybody?
That's a certain strand of utilitarianism.
Okay.
In a sense, that might lean. Yeah, that's a tricky one. So you're saying like only do what's best for you, and it will lead to being good for everyone else.
Yeah, I'm not like an expert on that. I just know that's why people don't like Atlas Shrugged.
That's something I should know, dude. I think that if the goal is having it be good for everyone else, then that seems like a utilitarian thing.
Right.
Yeah, if that seems consequentialist.
Yeah.
Right? If that's why you act good for yourself, so you can benefit everyone else, so I would say.
Yeah, but so like I guess for my question then is like, so this individual that's like the hyper personality.
But that's not their goal.
That's not their goal. They don't care.
Yeah, they just want power and they want what's theirs, and they're going to do anything and everything to get it.
If they want the most amount of power, they're going to need to work with others still. So I think that would be my approach, is like,
Yeah.
well, you're still going to have to cooperate because, they didn't build the pyramids by one individual group
Yeah,
effort,
yeah.
Like maybe Pharaoh was sitting in that throne, but are you Pharaoh right now? Because I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
so I
sure.
think that's where I would come to, is like, we're cooperative creatures, and
Yeah.
to get the best value from your life, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to work with others.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite profound too. Like, power isn't like okay. So this opens up a whole different discussion. So and you can leave whenever you want, by the way.
I'm enjoying it.
So a lot of people think that power is the centralizing force of humanity, right?
Okay.
That the best way to understand humanity throughout all ages is a power dynamic of victims and victimizers, right? But what you're saying sounds like it might, in a certain sense, contradict that, because you're saying that love is a necessary requirement for any degree of cooperation. And the fact that we are cooperating even to build this building or that one means that there can't just be power. There also has to be love. Would you say that's an accurate understanding? Or did I just kind of tie a knot around it? Like, you can disagree with my question.
I don't know if it necessarily is like a dichotomy between like love and power. But I do think
there's a golden thread between them.
there's gotta be. Like, I don't think anybody does like large works and large ideas without something that drives them, and I think that love is a part of it. I don't want to say that everybody's driven by love all the time. I sure know I'm not. Like,
Yeah, sure. But it's in everyone, maybe?
yeah.
Except for maybe that guy I was talking
Yeah, except for like people with like really neurodivergent like functionalities that's like that they're just like do not conceive of the idea of love.
Essentially psychopaths.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think they even can feel compassion, like
Sure.
To some extent. Like
Yeah.
they're like. Okay, that's a bold claim. I'm not a I don't study that. I can't make that claim.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to believe that like love exists in all of us to some degree, somewhere, about something. And even if it's just loving yourself, that is a form of it. That like
Yeah.
you're still looking out for something with the intent of like bettering or improving or growing, and
Yeah.
what that looks like to you might be different. Like growth and improvement looks different to you than me, but like I think there's that commonality there. And so
Yeah.
as we go into pursuits that is an advancement in some degree, I think that like we have to have that belief that on the other end it will be worth it. And what is it worth it for? The people that it will benefit, or the changes that we can make, or even if it's like I'm gonna make this so I can make a bunch of money. Like, is that money just for you? Okay, that's self-love. I don't know. Like, it's something like that. Like, there's like any of these pursuits got to have that like underlying goal, and I think love's a part of it. I like I said, I don't want to make that claim that like love is everything. That feels really like hippie to me, and I don't
Yeah.
know if I agree with all that.
Well, maybe you're making the claim that it's not everything, but it's not there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's not just power.
Yeah.
Like, there's love is there. Like, and it's in. Would you say it exists in everything? Like, even if it's not everything, does it exist in everything?
I think so.
Because that seems like the claim.
I
you're
think
making.
so. I think love exists everywhere
Yeah.
in different degrees and shapes and sizes. But I think
Yeah.
that might be what the one objective truth I'll believe in, is that there's love.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Is it? And I think that's a pretty good place to end if we were gonna
Yeah.
end.
Go
But
ahead.
is there some kind of way to unify this understanding of love, or is it just kind of wherever it is, there it is? Is there kind of this centralizing understanding we can put on that concept and say like is, I don't know. Because a lot of Christians would say that's what God is. He's like the centralizing kind of golden thread that all love is connected to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Shoot, I mean, not in a monastic sense, like in a like a monotheistic God way, but I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I can agree, like, God is love, or potentially love is God might be a better way to put it. Like,
Maybe they're the same thing.
maybe the same thing. Yeah.
context.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
and it doesn't have to be Christian context. We're just talking about the word God. And
Yeah.
Like how you would conceive of
Some greater force existing in the universe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna choose to believe that's love. Yeah.
that. Yeah, and it's kind of centralizes in some respect.
Mm-hmm. And it's it goes back to that like lack of understanding force, like
Yeah.
idea of like I don't think I truly understand what like full love looks like.
Yeah.
Do you ever listen to Alan Watts?
I haven't.
Okay, he has one talk that talks about like every once in a while, like a being of like pure love crops up on Earth, and they
Okay,
become inspirations for generations.
Yeah.
And it's like a being who is ever giving and ever like outwardly focused on the betterment of others. That like
Yeah.
isn't something that we all can achieve, but we'd like to.
Yeah. The ideals.
Yeah, and so I think like it exists. I think it like I think it's there. I
Yeah.
think that's probably what God is.
Fair enough. All right,
Cool.
man.
Thank you.
It was good talking to you, Jay.